Okay. Yeah, so basically my presentation today, I'll do my best to keep up with the slides and things like that. If you guys see some problems, if you see any like difficulties, like let me know. I'm switching slides now. Do you guys see me switching slides?
Not
yet.
so.
I don't see anything. I see person, brains, and reasons. They ain't the same.
I don't see the
Yeah.
Right now.
Okay, let's yeah, that's basically that's pretty much what I want you to see. All right, so yeah, no, I just wanted to get into it. Basically, it's the presentation is called Person's Brains and the Reason They Ain't the Same. Like I said, this is a bit more abbreviated than I would have liked it to be. I could make stronger and deeper arguments about this if I had the time, but things have been pretty weird at home. Things have been pretty weird out here. A lot of, quarantine and government restrictions, and there's a lot going on right now. I'm going to try and touch on that towards the end and give you guys a chance to air some of that, because this isn't like, I'm not presenting some expertise to you guys. I'm not some, crazy top-notch speaker like Lacona or any of these guys. I'm just, I'm doing research on persons, and I wanted to present some of you guys that. And I think apologetically, this could be helpful. And I'm basically, it's not so much a presentation as I'm going to walk you through a thought process. That's kind of what I'm going to do, because I think this is the way you kind of have to do this. So basically, do you guys see that slide change? You see goals?
No.
I don't. Not yet.
How about now?
No.
That's super weird. Screen sharing is paused. Let me do that. My screen sharing. What about now?
Yep.
Okay, so goals. All right, so the thing I want to address is the statement, I am my brain. It's probably something that abbreviated, or a way that somebody might address you in a philosophical or apologetical discussion. Think generally that they are their brain. And I think that generally you want to make sure that, oh guys, if you guys aren't muted, mute. Oh, also, I'm sorry, just a side note before we get into this. If you guys have questions, I'm going to run through this presentation pretty quickly. I want you to, if you come up with a question in the moment, type it into the chat, and then we'll work through the questions in the chat first. Okay, so type your questions in the chat, and then we'll work through those, and then we'll basically have a Q&A back and forth discussion after I'm through. Okay, so my goals in this presentation is I want to address that statement, I am my brain. I want to do a little work to show why that's not only false, but it's unreasonable. Scientifically and philosophically. So I'm not just going to present philosophical arguments. I want to present some scientific data that makes it seem as if to a reasonable subject like myself, I think it's wrong to say something like, I am my brain. I want to briefly consider some alternative views. That's going to be super brief because I can only touch on it. And then I want to address some implications that I think are pretty relevant to the situation today, given human dignity and different things like that that are kind of hanging in the balance right now. Resume share. All right. Resume share. I don't know why. Ugh. I'm trying to share you guys this thing and it's not working.
I see something. I see a screen. Oh.
What do you see?
Now I see person's brains and the reasons they ain't the same again. And then before there was a screen that came up.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe
I see something now. Statement 1. I am my brain.
Yeah, and a bunch of speaker notes that you weren't supposed to look at. Got it.
Yay!
All right, now you have the secret. It was supposed to be cool. Now it's just dumb. Okay, so basically, we might be brains or something like brains or parts of brains, perhaps entire central nervous systems. Call that view that we are something like brains, the brain view. That's a direct quote from Erik Olson. Erik Olson is he's a philosopher. He's really good at his job too, and he's also an atheist. He's not a Christian. He's a naturalist. He doesn't believe in God. He has no skin in the game when it comes to these things. I think that's an interesting perspective on this score. So anyway, basically, if you are your brain, then you are You're about 4 inches tall, you weigh less than 3 pounds, you're located entirely within your cranium and made up of mostly pink, yellowish tissue, which is an interesting fact. In fact, let me see if I got this quote someplace. Thomas Nagel once delivered a paper in which he proposed that a person be identified with her brain. The commentator remarked that if that were so, he shouldn't have been so worried about his weight because it is much less than he had thought. Sort of an interesting view. It's a little trite to say that, well, it's wrong. I'm not my brain. I'm 5'7". And brains are only 4 inches tall. I'm not pinkish and yellowish, even though I kind of am. Most of you aren't. It's wrong to say, right? It seems just wrong. But the statement, I am my brain, is still pretty prevalent amongst people who are academics and neuroscientists. There are neuroscientists. I actually read a paper. I plan on including the quote, but I couldn't find it earlier. But it was like, basically, we're really sorry to all of our friends in the theological department and the philosophy departments, but they're all wrong about persons. We're just the set of tissue that's stuck inside your cranium. And they say things like that a lot. And it's actually really irritating, given that you have Olson and other very, very schooled people who actually investigate these things and find out that you're not that. And there's very few arguments to support it. So I'm gonna move on to the next thing. So I think the appropriate question to a person who says, I am my brain, is why think that? And I want to provide some scientific and philosophical reasons to think otherwise. So I want to talk about Phineas Gage for a minute. Phineas Gage is a very, very interesting case. The interesting thing about Phineas Gage is he got his brains blown out by a railroad tie and stayed awake the entire time. The only reason he almost died was from the infection later. So let me read you something. In September 1848, in Cavendish, Vermont, a premature explosion drove a tamping iron, which is 1.1 meters long, 6 millimeters in diameter, and it weighs 6 kilograms. For the Americans in the room, that's about 3.5 feet long, and it weighed about 13 pounds. So a huge rod, and I have a picture of it I can show you in a minute. A big rod basically flew through this guy's head because of a premature explosion. And I don't want to get too graphic. They do get very graphic in the story. It's very, very clear that his brain, a good portion of it was gone. In fact, it goes so far as to say the attending physician, who was just what he called himself a country doctor, he stuck his finger in the top of his head and touched his other finger through the bottom of his head. So that's not the most nice thing to say, but that's true. That happened. It was well documented. And during this entire procedure, Dr. Harlow, who did it, was summoned to the scene, and basically he patched him up. Phineas Gage, the entire time, was conscious, speaking, and what else was he able to do? He was able to walk. He had gross motor functions like being able to sit and stand. He could read and write. He could access memory because he could remember people that were around. He could recognize faces, people, and he also could communicate cogently with the doctor about his own position. So he was reporting from his first person about how, like at one point, the doctor was telling him to sit down. He goes, "Don't worry, I'll be back at work in a few days." Like he was that awake and cogent throughout this whole experience, which is insane. If you guys can see that picture, that's Phineas, and he's sitting with the railroad tie that got blown through his head. It's taller than you'd expect. It's about, like I say, 3.5 feet tall, and it's really heavy. So it's this big piece of metal went right through the guy's head, and he was conscious the whole time. So here's an issue. It's hard to believe that you are the organ that's in your brain. You are your brain. If you have your brains, if it's possible for a person to get their brains blown out, literally, and stay conscious. It seems like if you are your brain, then you are the consciousness that is provided by your brain. But a certain amount of your brain can be lost, and you'll never lose consciousness. Maybe not you, maybe not anybody else. I wouldn't recommend trying this, but this is what happened to him. This is a well-documented case. That's an interesting scientific bit on why I think that you're not the organ called your brain, but I'll get to a little bit more about that. There's a philosophical issue I want to point out here too. The question about I am my brain, which brain, is a good question. Consider the fact, this is Olson writing, consider the fact there appear to be many candidates for your brain. Many candidates of varying sizes for being me. Beings that seem to have all of the equipment they need to think, and within my mental activity where it takes place. There is my brain and various parts of it, such as my cerebral hemispheres. There are also many candidates larger than my brain, my head, my upper half, this entire human organism, and so on. For that matter, we might ask, why am I not something bigger still, which has this organism as a proper part? So maybe I am just a brain, but am I just a brain, or am I brain plus, or am I brain minus? Am I just a piece of my brain? Because it seems like Phineas Gage lost a whole bunch of his brain and he was still himself. Though that case can be controversial because evidently his personality changed. And I don't want to get into that now. If you guys have questions about that, put it in the chat.
Can I mention something? I don't think we're seeing your slides. We're not seeing your slides.
At all?
All I see is I am my brain. Is that right?
No.
Yeah, me too.
We're not seeing your slides.
I don't know how to make it. It says my screen sharing is paused. I don't know how to do it. So let's see if I can screen share.
Because you were talking about Phineas Gage, and I know who that is.
Yeah.
And then you said there were illustrations, and I'm like, I don't see them. Yeah.
Okay. Let me see if I can get you guys. Let me see if I can get you another share. I'm sorry, you guys. I didn't realize this would be this tough.
Yeah, don't worry, Jordan. Those things are super struggle. I've been on Zoom calls for a while, and I'm like, please take your time.
You can choose to share aspects of your screen.
Okay. I'm gonna work through this. Can you guys see it now? Scientific.
Yeah, I can see. Yes, I can see scientific issues, and then I can see the notes at the bottom. So
okay. Let me do present. All right. Okay. So can you see this now? Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Cool. All right. Perfect. All right.
Woohoo!
Goals. I am my brain is a stupid statement, and let's get to why. That's Phineas Gage. In case you were wondering, he's a pretty big dude. He was a 25-year-old healthy male that got his brain blown out, basically. And it's a little worrisome that people think that they are their brain when a guy like him, who could get his brains blown out and stay conscious the entire time, that's a possibility. Basically, here are some of the facts. I didn't include all of them because it's a pretty controversial issue. They're actually still at UCLA. They're putting together very, very sophisticated neuroscientific models of how his brain must have been affected by this. And there are some controversial results that come out of that, which is very interesting, some of which I thought were ridiculous. There was one set of scientists that modeled the brain injury that he got and said, well, you know, the amount of damage was actually minimal to the point of it probably would have been equal to a sufficient sized brain lesion. And I just think that's nonsense. But that's not the whole matter. You guys have to look into this yourself. I can probably provide you with some links if you're interested in following this up. It's very controversial. Even the facts of the case about him personally are really, really apocryphal and strange. And there's a whole bunch of controversy that surrounds him. But the fact of the matter is there's a 25-year-old man who lost nearly 11% of the white matter of his brain, 4% of the cortex or gray matter of his brain, and it damaged the left hemisphere almost exclusively. Interesting thing about that is there are philosophers who have argued that what you are personally, is the left hemisphere of your brain, which is really awkward because this guy lost most of it and still was himself. There's also people that argue that your left hemisphere is the only thing that can do calculations or language. I won't get too far into that. I really did want to go there with you guys, but it's not distilled enough. And if you have questions, put them in the chat and then I'll address them later. Hopefully I can give you satisfactory answers. So here's another philosophical issue that we come to. Which brain is you? So this is, apart from Phineas Gage, we've got some other issues. Which brain is you? Consider the fact that there appear, this is Olson speaking, consider the fact there appear to be many candidates of varying sizes, and he goes on to say, it's unprincipled. Which brain is me? Are you the left hemisphere of your brain, like Tom Nagel argues? Are you your entire brain? Or are you the brain and other parts of you? There are other things to be considered besides this. So to say that you're just a brain is misleading. It's not that simple, basically. Not only that, think about a prisoner sentenced to life. If you're just a brain and a different part of your brain can change or it can be replaced, is it the case that after 7 years, scientists say after 7 years your brain is completely replaced, is it the case that we should be letting people out of life sentences after 7 years? It's a different person, and not even technically speaking, it's a different person. Technically speaking, you're a different person from moment to moment, but that's silly. Also, what about dead brains? Apocryphally, there's a story that Einstein's brain is in a jar in Kansas. You guys can look this up. the person who exhumed his body stole the brain. He was fascinated with it. And he drove all around the country, and evidently it's an apocryphal story. People don't know if it's quite true. It's like an urban legend almost, but his brain is in a basement in Kansas. Is it proper to say that Einstein is in a basement in Kansas right now, and he's been for years? No, because he's a dead brain, and that doesn't count as a person. But what's the difference? If you're just your brain, then why are you not considering that a person? I think we have to change this statement, which is proper. So the second statement I want to address is I am a functioning brain. This is a good way to amend the sort of situation. I'm a functioning brain. It sounds more like what we mean when we address the issue. I'm not saying I'm a corpse. I'm not saying my existence is vanishingly brief. I'm saying that I'm a functioning brain. As Eric Olson writes, a brain insofar as it is in certain states of the sort that make someone capable of thought and consciousness. But what sort of thing is a functioning brain now? Now we have to ask more questions. What sort of thing is a functioning brain? How do functioning brains relate to regular brains, plain old normal brains that may or may not be functioning? All right. So here's an issue about the functioning brain. If you think that you're a functioning brain, I have news for you. Your heart has a very, very interesting little brain in it. In fact, they call it the little brain attached to your, or they call it the heart's nervous system, or the heart brain. So there is a heart brain, and let me explain to you why I think so. Recent findings by Dr. R. Moore in 1991 discovered that the heart has its little brain, or intrinsic cardiac nervous system, which he called the heart brain, and it's composed of approximately 40,000 neurons that are alike neurons to the brain, meaning that the heart has its own nervous system. In addition, the heart communicates with the brain in many methods: neurologically, biochemically, biophysically, and energetically. The vagus nerve, which is 80% afferent, carries the information from the heart and other internal organs to the brain. Signals from the heart brain redirect the medulla, the hypothalamus, the thalamus, and the amygdala, and the cerebral cortex. Thus, the heart sends more signals to the brain than vice versa. That's fascinating, by the way. I was jumping out of my seat when I saw this. Research has demonstrated that pain perception in particular is modulated by neural pathways and methods targeting a heart pump or a heart, such as the vagus network. It's a little hard to pronounce some of this medical terminology. Nerve stimulation and heart rhythm coherence feedback techniques. The heart is not just a pump, it has its neural network or little brain. The methods targeting the heart modulate pain regions in the brain. These methods seem to modulate the key changes that occur in brain regions and are involved in the cognitive and emotional factors of pain. Thus, the heart is probably a key moderator of pain. So this is scientific data that's come out in the last 20 years that actually indicates that the heart has its own little brain. Not only that, the brain sends fewer signals to the heart than vice versa. The brain receives more from the heart than it gives to the heart. The heart has a key role in pain moderation and emotional pain moderation. It's a very, very sophisticated thing. It is not just a little pump. The heart muscle, the thing thumping in your chest, is not nothing. And to say that you are your brain or you are your functioning brain is misleading, because a whole bunch of this stuff is happening elsewhere in your body. And so it's hard to believe, even scientifically, that you are a functioning brain. Okay, there's another issue. There's a philosophical issue. How do you know this brain is you? And what I mean by this brain is like, it's this one, it's in my head. Well, why is it your head? Well, because it contains my brain. Oh, no. Now you're reasoning in a circle. Not only that, this depends on your perspective. But how can that be? In order to claim that this brain is your brain, you have to think it's yours first. So this is circular. In order to claim that you are your brain, the one inside your head, which is your head because it has your brain in it, you have to already have decided which brain is yours, which is begging the question. So philosophically, it doesn't even make sense to say, well, I'm a functioning brain. Which functioning brain is the correct question? Or, well, is a reply to that statement. And I think that it can't be answered. Scientifically, it doesn't make sense because your heart has a brain of its own. And then you are your brain makes no sense because you're already begging the question. You already think you're something else. The only reason you'd say that is because you already have a perspective. And that's begging the question. So it doesn't work. But I think at this point in the conversation, generally this is where I get to, people get sad and they say things like, I'm nothing. This isn't a real thing. We're just talking around each other. Maybe there's no such thing as a self. This is all an illusion anyway. I'm just kind of burdening under the illusion of consciousness. I think I'm a thing, but I'm not really a thing. I'm nothing. I'm a nihilist. There are some nihilists throughout history too. Olson writes to define nihilism, there's no sort of thing that we are. We don't exist. Our personal pronouns refer to nothing, there being nothing for them to refer to. Nothing thinks our thoughts, nothing wrote these words, and nothing is now reading them. Call this view nihilism. Nihilism is more or less the same as what Galen Strawson called the no ownership doctrine of the self, that it is only a linguistic illusion that one ascribes one's states of consciousness to anything at all, that there is a proper subject of these apparent ascriptions that states of consciousness belong to or are states of anything. So this is an actual view in the philosophical literature. And I think that a lot of people kind of punt to this view, like ultimately we're nothing because we're really just brain function. People do that. But I think once you get around the whole brain function argument, you start to think, well, you know, this is all nothing anyway. We're just a bunch of evolutionary chemical bags that are walking around. And I think that's silly, and here's a couple reasons why. Persons and dragons. Are persons like dragons or not? Let me get to why. Basically, a bunch of philosophers held this view throughout history. But one problem with this is we seem to think that persons exist. We don't tend to think dragons exist, but we just said that persons don't exist. So are persons like dragons, or are they something a little bit better than dragons? Why are so many people burdening under the illusion that they're persons, that they have parents that are persons, that they have neighbors that are persons? All of these persons are walking around, but nobody's confused about how many dragons are in London. They are confused about how many persons are in London. So why are they confused? If so, if you think that persons are just like dragons, we have very little evidence for one another, for one and not the other. We have very little evidence for dragons, but very, very much evidence for persons. And that's weird because they both have they stand on the same footing. That's an odd thing to have. If not, then what makes persons different? I'm still waiting on an answer. But somebody could give an answer. Somebody could say something like, maybe, somebody could say something like, let's see. These are some other scientific issues. Nihilism is scientifically unreasonable. And if you ever get like, I suppose if you're out there doing apologetic work and you think about a person who is bent toward this view, it's interesting to kind of pin them in the scientific sort of mode. A lot of people who would say something like, I'm nothing, or I'm just a functioning brain, are usually going to be kind of like akin to, they like the scientific arguments. Here's a problem. Neuroscience depends on first-person reports to do the job that it does. And I want to just give a little argument considering this. If selves or persons are completely fictitious, then so is the data provided by neuroscientific research. The neuroscientific research is not fictitious, therefore selves and persons are not completely fictitious. And that follows logically. That's a deductively valid argument. Somebody would have to basically deny that first-person reports fund the neuroscientific research, or they would have to say that neuroscience is somehow fictitious. Both seem unreasonable. Those are your only two options if this is what you want to claim. Scientifically, you are not backed by this. And people will definitely jump on this train like, well, you're just nothing, you're just an ape that evolved amorphously throughout history, and this is the silliness you're burdening under the illusion of. But neuroscience says different. The neuroscientific research depends on first-person reports, and the neuroscientific research is good. So if you want to do that, you basically have to deny neuroscience being real, or you have to say that it's not dependent on first-person reports, and both of those are false. And so nihilism is scientifically untenable. But somebody might modify the question a little bit more and say something like, I'm broadly speaking nothing. Like, yeah, I know neuroscience works, and I know that the scientific issues are real, and the philosophical issues, I get it, all right? It's a little trite. I understand what you mean, but broadly speaking, I'm not a thing. I'm nothing. Here I want to give a quick little. I want to give a quick refutation to this sort of argument. Let's see here. This is being the slides are being a bit uncooperative. But I want to give a quick refutation. It's a little trite. I think people are probably not going to be super convinced by this if you run into them, but they're not going to be happy about it is basically what's happening. But I would say this. It's a philosophical problem to say that I don't exist, or I believe I don't exist, or I'm broadly speaking nothing. What they have to say is that I believe I exist is false. But they have to assert it. And if you're going to assert something, you exist, because things that don't exist can't assert things. So it goes like this. I believe I exist cannot be falsely held, because a belief needs someone to hold it, a believer to hold it. Therefore, it is true that I exist, and nihilism is false. So there are philosophical issues to these sorts of statements. I want to give you guys a little bit more. My stuff is kind of messing up. Can everybody still hear me? Somebody give me a thumbs up or something. Am I still around? Am I talking to myself?
You're good. I can hear you and see you.
Perfect.
You're doing great.
Thank you. All right, so I wanted to talk about alternatives that I'm possibly a soul. I didn't really get into this too much. I can kind of go off the top of the head and tell you what I was going to tell you. It would have been a little bit more formal. It would have been a little bit more rigid. Basically, what I think is the only way you can describe what persons are is through calling them something immaterial. The only way that you can have a self that exists over time, that avoids the problems that I'm posing here, is that you have to be immaterial. Because material things have parts. And when you get part replacement, you get a change of identity. When identity changes, so do you, if that's what you are. I don't think it's possible for you to be equal to a material object. I think you have to be equal to an immaterial object. Funny enough, throughout the literature, you have a lot of people saying this, like Derek Parfit, who is very against soul views. He's very against animalism, which is another popular view that's held by Eric Olson, the guy who I've been quoting this whole time. He's very against those views, but he would call you an embodied mind, which is weird because I don't know what a mind is. If minds aren't brains and minds aren't central nervous systems or pieces of brains or something, what is it? Is it he would say something like it's psychological continuity, which means that you think you're the same person as yesterday and the day before and the day before that. If you have those same memories and you think you're that person, then you're probably that person, and there's probably no competing people for that title. Nobody wants to be me, right? Nobody wants to be Jordan. Who would want to do that? If you do, by the way, don't. Nobody really wants that. Nobody wants to change parts like that and just become a different person. Not only that, what does that do to ethics? You put somebody in prison for a life sentence, but their life is vanishingly short. It makes no sense to say that we endure over time. And a lot of people will say something like, we perdure over time, which is a different way of saying a similar thing. What you have to say is that you're a collection of selves spread over time. This is the temporal parts view held by Hudson and others. And I believe David Lewis. One thing I do want to point out here is that the soul view is not the only Christian view. I think it's the best Christian view far and away. I think a lot of the other views have serious theological problems, but there are Christians who do not hold to that view. And you can still be a Christian. You can still love Jesus. You can still believe in the afterlife. You can still believe in the atonement. If you don't believe in souls, you can believe in something else. For instance, Peter Van Inwagen, a philosopher from Notre Dame who's brilliant, absolutely stellar Christian man, he believes in physicalism. He does not believe that you have an immaterial soul. He thinks that a life is categorically different in kind from physical objects, and that's the reason why you're not nothing. You get people like Lynn Rudder Baker. Lynn Rudder Baker was a Christian philosopher who believed, she just recently died, the late Lynn Rudder Baker. She just recently died, but she believed that you constituted yourself. That means that there are two objects present in each situation. So you are not the animal that is wearing your clothes and speaking your words. You are equal to your first person perspective. The animal that speaks your words and eats your food and walks around and gets indicated as you all the time is not, strictly speaking, true. You are a constitution of several items. Okay, one is a first person perspective. You are the like what we would normally call you is a constitution, but strictly speaking, you are your first person perspective. Then there's guys who believe in the soul. There's Cartesian dualists like Richard Swinburne. There are Thomist-ish people like my teacher, J.P. Moreland, or you have people who have interesting views of personal identity like William Lane Craig. There are a lot of people out there. These are all Christians. Nancy Murphy, Joel Green, lots of other people. I could tell you guys about this forever. The point is, there's a lot of different views on this. But I think that the idea that you're just like a sack of chemicals that is sitting in your cranium is silly. And lots of people that study this stuff think the same. I want to open it up for questions or chat or anything like that. I want to open it up to that now because I want to talk to you. I want to talk to you guys about what you think about all this. Like I say, I wish that it would have been a bit more rigorous in terms of positive arguments, but I just couldn't do it. It's been a really weird time so far. So anyway, I want to open up to questions. Do we have questions in the chat that I can take a look at? Okay.
I think there are, Jordan. You could look at them.
Okay, Casper asked, not the whole matter, it's gray matter. Well, the conclusion of the whole matter is you're not your brain, so I don't care what color it is. All right.
Okay, question. If you're not,
Let me get to the chat. Should I get to the? Can I get to the chat?
sorry.
Because they asked first. Hold your question, Chris, and I'll ask the chat questions first. Then I'll get you. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So Casper asked, did you say the heart has neurons? Yes, I did. The heart has more neurons. In fact, according to JP, the heart has more neurons. The heart muscle has more neurons than any single part of your own brain, including the hemisphere, or including any of the major parts: the prefrontal cortex, the amygdala, any of the major parts of your brain, even your brainstem, has fewer neurons than your heart does. The heart muscle, it's not a pump, or it's not just a pump anyway. It's a lot more than that, and it actually turns out that it sends more signals to your brain than the opposite. So yeah, it's pretty wild. I remember this question in Robin Williams' movie, What Dreams May Come. Did these people believe in soul sleep? Some of them do. There's actually a really interesting question on what the intermediate state is. JP gets into this pretty heavily in our philosophy of mind class. I don't have the answer right away. I know that it's philosophically and theologically controversial. People do think that sometimes they think the final judgment is the next time you'll wake up. Sometimes people believe in soul sleep, like you said. And JP, I think, believes in an intermediate state where people are out of their body, but not necessarily in heaven or hell or something like that, but they get weird. And these cases get super weird because there's near-death experiences, and NDEs are actually an extremely well-documented literature. It's wild, some of the stuff that people do. Like, for instance, there was a situation where a woman died. I believe it was a woman died in the operating room. She floated above her body, saw what the surgeons were doing, decided she wanted to float up to the roof, okay? Goes through the ceiling, floats to the roof. I don't know how she's propelling herself, but she saw things on the roof. She described the room, and she saw a tennis shoe on the roof, one tennis shoe. And one of the nurses checked, and it was exactly how she described it. There's no way this woman could have known this. And there are a myriad of cases like this. These cases get really, really spooky. There are people who feel that they're appeared to by Jesus. He's very well described. The accounts of it are incredibly well documented and attested. I can, at the end of the presentation, if I get some time where I can think, I'll put some links in the chat for you guys about documented literature on this, where it's medical doctors documenting these things. You don't necessarily have to buy into it theologically. There might be some other reasons why you dismiss it. I know this is controversial, but there are really good reasons to believe it. So whether you're convinced by it or not, it's not the point. I think that the education is what matters. But Chris, you were next.
Okay, so if you are not your brain,
yeah,
then what are you?
Well, I wanted to get more into positive arguments for this. There are a couple of different things. There are a couple of different views on this. Some people think that you're a bunch of time slices, all right? So you're something like a time worm. So the beginning of you have a worm, imagine it like this long, right? And at the very beginning, you're like a baby or in conception or something like that. And then as you grow up, you're like a worm of temporal parts, all divided into moments, okay? And each moment of that, when you count the entire thing, counts as you. No one moment is that, just like your hand isn't necessarily you or your eye isn't necessarily you. All the slices together count as you. This is called this four-dimensional time worm view. It's held by Hud Hudson. It's held by David Lewis, I believe. There's a lot of people that hold this. Now, there's another view. There's a good view. It's called animalism. Animalism is the idea that you are the organism that thinks your thoughts. Okay?
Your organism that what?
That thinks your thoughts.
Your thoughts.
Yeah, you are the organism that thinks your thoughts. It's a weird thing to say, but it actually fits with a lot of the literature, especially with the heart muscle thing. You have a lot going on in the rest of your body that makes it seem like you are the whole thing. You're the whole show, right? Now, I think that there's problems with animalism. Derek Parfit kind of does a number on it, actually, in a paper called "We Are Not Human Beings." I think he demolishes it, but he argues for the brain view. The problem is he doesn't really argue for brainism or the brain that I've been presenting. He says that you are an embodied mind, is what he says. Those are his words. And I find that weird because I don't know what he means by that. it certainly doesn't mean that I am this squishy organ in my head, because we've seen from Phineas Gage that you stay the same person, even when your brain is radically re-altered very quickly in an explosion. We've also seen that there's no reason to call your brain yours. If like you're just making that up. Like, why is it yours? Well, because it's in my head. Why is it your head? Well, because it's my brain in there. That's circular. You have no good reason to believe that outside of the fact that you want to. So it seems like there's something else, like you have a knowledge of what you are internally when you introspect. Does that make sense?
Kind of.
Yeah. So what I would argue is that you're a soul, which is an immaterial substance, which is somehow adhered to your body. That God puts your soul in your body. Or maybe your soul is what constitutes your personal makeup. Aristotle thought that the soul was the form of the body.
You didn't mention the mind. I'm surprised.
Yeah, well, I mean, souls and minds are actually, they're very close. But the mind, for JP and for others, and probably for myself, the soul has a mind as a part. But the soul actually contains quite a bunch more, including your spirit and I think a lot of capacities and faculties that you can't just attribute to just the mind. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I always hear mind, body, soul, mind, body, soul, mind, body, soul.
Well, I mean, that is a thing. And then some people say soul, spirit, body. I think that the spirit is part of the soul and the mind is part of the soul. And then the soul is attached to the body. That's kind of that's the view that we've kind of been given in philosophy of mind by people who are substance dualists. I flirt with idealism. I won't get into that. But it's interesting. Basically, the idea that maybe everything is made of mind at bottom. But I flirt with it, but I'm not married to it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean you're still single, Jordan?
No, I'm not single, but I know someone who would be really upset if they heard me say that.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding, man.
Okay, I'm joking. No. The point is, like, I really think that the main reason for this presentation is I've been kind of roped into so many arguments with people that just want to say, man, I'm just my brain, and we're just brains and skulls. Like, that's all we are. And the more you actually think about that, people who do this work professionally, who study what the mind is, who study what the brain is, they know they're not the same thing. And even though there are a lot of neuroscientists who would say, you're just your brain, and they get pretty arrogant about it in the literature, when they're challenged on the issue, you find that they're not as staunch as they thought. And there are some exceptions to that rule. For instance, there's Jeffrey Schwartz, and I've got a link, and I'll put it in the chat. Where is Schwartz's link?
He's a professor at UCLA, right?
Yes, he's a professor at UCLA. He had a couple of breakthroughs where he actually really helped a lot of people with anxiety and depression and a lot of he's very interesting. He's very heavily endorsed by Biola. They actually show a video from him. If you go to the counseling center, you have to watch this video from him about meditation and mindfulness and things like that, about how you can actually rewire your brain with thoughts, which is a fascinating concept, because if you are your brain, how are you going outside your brain to make your brain do stuff? It's not impossible, because you could be one part of your brain working on another part of your brain. But the question is, which part are you? Do you change all the time? Are you the thing outside your brain? Well, what's that? I think your mind is something distinct and different for a lot of reasons. But I want more questions from you guys. I'm not 100% on all of and everything about this stuff. There's still a lot of literature out. What do you guys say?
I have another question, but I want other people to have a chance, because I already asked the question.
No one's saying anything. You should go on.
So because I'm probably new at this. This is probably the first time I probably talked about this, but I work with, I come from like a heavy medical background. And I'm in social work, where I work with children with autism. And so like I've looked at a lot at like the developments of the brain. And so like how would you feel like I guess with high functioning autism, as far as like say someone who, like for example, when I work with a teenager who is high functioning autism, they don't have that filter, as far as like for them to talk inappropriately with another person, or for them to, in a sense, it just seems like the personality is different, because their brain is underdeveloped, right? Parts of the brain are underdeveloped, like with ADHD. You know, if you have ADHD, you're more prone to be more angry. I only say that because I have ADHD. So like parts of your brain. So how would you, I guess, I'm new at this, so I'm not too familiar. I guess those were the kind of thoughts that I were having. I guess. How would you? What are your thoughts on that?
No, I mean, you're making a good point. It's important. I had when I gave this presentation last week to a different group, and one guy asked me, he said, I'm a psychologist. How do you deal with split personalities? And like, what would you say about that? I'll tell you about that if you want, but to answer your question, like I work with I worked with autistic kids for years, actually. It was a summer job for the most part, but I actually worked at a couple of schools with some severely emotionally damaged or severely emotionally challenged and violent kids, a lot of which had autism or they were on the spectrum in some way. And it's a very interesting sort of interaction. I would say that the brain is I'm never gonna argue that the brain is like completely disconnected from the mind. I think the mind and brain are intimately connected. The way that if you poke yourself with a pin, your soul is the thing that feels it. Or if you commit, a sin or you get involved in vice, it hurts your soul. Your body and your brain, your body and your mind are radically connected. And I think that's the way God wanted to make it, so that this world actually means something, so we could build our souls into something. Better or worse, depending on our choices. But no, I'm not arguing that the brain is I'm not arguing that the brain is, is like unattached. It's more like the vehicle that the mind drives, or the instrument the mind plays. So it's like, it's more like the violin and the bowstring and the bow versus the thing itself. Nobody would claim that the violin is a musician, but people claim that's what I kind of think it's like. And things like Alzheimer's that seem to radically affect the personhood of an individual, or vegetative states and things like that. I still think that those are persons. I think that the organs that they have are broken and they can't manipulate the world around them. They can't function in this world, but it doesn't mean that their soul is broken. It means that the organ they're trying to function in this world with isn't working anymore. Does that answer your question or not?
It does. Thank you for the explanation.
Okay. Yeah. Alzheimer's is tough. But the psychology is not super what I'm worried about in terms of strictly speaking. The psychology is not exactly right, or my target. My target is like the nature of what's going on here. Are you equal to the organ that is made of gray, white matter and blood and tissue inside your skull? Is that what you are? And I think that the scientific and philosophical data really, really speak against that. Eric Olson, who's a leading expert in this field, he is not cool with the brain view. He thinks it's ridiculous, in fact. I think he's wrong to think it's ridiculous. A lot of people seem to have that inclination that it's like, well, it's all up here, or, once this goes, I'm done, or, it's very colloquial to say that. But when you start to get into the metaphysics of it, when you start to really talk turkey, it doesn't hold up against scrutiny. It works for a little while and then doesn't work. And I think that's probably the reason why philosophers get frustrated about it. And neuroscientists tend to cave after a few passes. Or so JP reports to me. And so does Jeffrey Schwartz. And so do a lot of other people that actually talk to people or neuroscientists about how this actually works. I've got another question from Sarah. She said, can you give us the article regarding the heart and neurons? Yeah, I can. I'll put it in the chat. It's a little hard for me to navigate while I'm doing the thing because I had all this data a little bit more. I had it all like right in front of me, and then the whole slideshow thing really threw me. So I can give you a whole bunch of stuff. I've got a whole bunch of articles about the current situation with the current political situation. And by the way, this connects to a lot of what we're talking about today. Yeah, okay. I'll give you I don't know if you're going to be able to see this. I'll put the link in the chat, and then I'll put the quote in the chat. This is, let's see. This is the quote that I read from, I'll get it for you, for the heart thing. It's from the New England, I believe it's the National Library of Medicine, publicmedicine.gov.
Ooh, thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, it's really interesting because that's pretty well known at this point, but not too many people. I don't know if you're going to be able to get in. I had to get an account, Sarah. But if you want the article, I can get it to you because it's not letting me put it. If the quote's too long, it's not letting me put it in the chat.
Okay.
Okay. But try and go on there. It just give me your email. Let's see. Out of the heart comes all sorts. Okay. So Casper asked, it's interesting when Jesus says, out of the heart comes all sorts of evil. I find it fascinating that the heart, the muscle that we consider to be just a pump for the most part, turns out to be extremely relevant to the way that we feel in terms of emotions, even our pain, and thought, even because it influences and sends signals, sends more signals to the brain than the brain sends to the heart. The heart is an extremely interesting little thing inside your chest that never stops going. It has its own little power pack on it, attached to it. It has its own little brain and nervous system. It has a lot going for it. So it's very interesting to find that the heart itself is actually radically involved in the brain, in our thought process. So yeah, and like the idea that the Bible has been saying forever that out of the heart come these things, or the heart is the seat of the emotions all throughout Scripture. That's not entirely medically untrue. And there's I'm giving you studies from the public medical library that's accurate, which is weird. We should probably believe the Bible more readily, but things get muddy, and as apologists, we have to make sure that we're covering our bases because we want to give real information to the people that we're trying to communicate with. A lot of people aren't super happy with the way that apologists tell their story. So Sarah Griffith asked, I wonder what happens with a heart transplant. It's actually been told to me anecdotally more than once. I haven't looked this up. I wanted to get you guys more information on this. I couldn't. But yeah, it's actually been recorded, evidently, in some medical literature, that people with heart transplants have certain desires and thoughts of the person that they got the heart transplant from. And this makes sense because their heart has been running neural pathways in the other person for their whole life, and then they have this new heart. And it makes sense to say that would happen. I don't know how prevalent that is, and I don't know how medically well documented it is. You might have to look into it yourself. But the fact that the heart muscle is not nothing. It's not just a pump. It has a whole network of things going on in it that sends signals to the brain that has a radical amount of control over the brain, more than I would have ever thought. Anyway, it makes sense to say that we want to look into this in terms of how this affects our thought process and our emotions and our pain receptors and things like that. Sarah's asking if this leads to animalism. No, I don't. I don't think this leads to animalism because I still think that there's a problem with which brain we're talking about. Olson actually says, he has a quote in here in my notes. He said that the problem with the brain view is that it's radically unprincipled. He says it here. I got it right now. The most serious problem for the brain view is that it has nothing to do with the implications about our size or identity over time. The real trouble is that it is unprincipled and that there's no good reason to believe it. Those are strong words. Consider the fact there appear to be many candidates of varying sizes. I've said this to you for being me. He ends up going on. He goes like, why am I not the society I live in? Why am I not the planet that I'm standing on? How do I know I'm not the part of just a smaller part of some much larger organism? So animalism is a stricter view because it actually says what's involved in our thoughts. But given cases about like maybe heart transplants and brain transplants and different things like that, brain damage, I don't think so. The philosophical attack on animalism is rough. And if you want to read it, I have a paper by Derek Parfit. Got it right off the internet. It's really easy to get. It's called "We Are Not Humans," or "You Are Not a Human Being." It's called. And he kind of bulldozes Olson. And Olson's view itself runs into a lot of problems, especially about the two thinkers problem, they call it. What ends up happening is you work out the logic, and it turns out that the animal that you are and the thinker are two different people. And so you count as two different persons. There are also really, really interesting pieces of medical literature on split brain cases. Now, split brain cases are usually performed because of epilepsy or forms of epilepsy where you get seizures. What happens is one hemisphere of the brain starts getting radical radical seizures, and it will transfer from the corpus callosum, which is the connector for the two parts, for the two halves of your brain. It'll transfer to the other. So doctors they cut the tie between the two hemispheres, and they can't communicate anymore. Now, the interesting thing about this is, in the 1970s, the scientists, actually in the late 60s and early 70s, scientists started to realize that the corpus callosum is important. One thing that they used to think it was that it was just a membrane to keep the hemispheres from sagging. Turns out it's really important for the way we think, because when the corpus callosum is severed, you have the left half of your brain, the left hemisphere, and the right hemisphere. Now, interestingly, in the medical literature and in these tests, in these results, or in the test results that follow from people being tested once they get these, once they have these, I think it's called a commissure. I can't remember the name of the procedure, but they cut the corpus callosum. What happens is they can test these people and have them perform where they put a screen, they perform certain rudimentary actions. They put a screen in between their visual fields, or they'll flash different pieces of information to parts of the visual field that doesn't allow the eye movement to catch it. Only one side of the brain will catch it, right? So if it's projected to your right side, it'll go right to your left hemisphere, because the right eye and the left eye are connected to opposite hemispheres, called ipsilateral control. So the right eye is controlled by the left hemisphere, and the left eye is controlled by the right side. So what'll happen is they'll flash things on the right side, and they'll flash things on the left side. And what they've determined from cases like this in humans, because they do it in monkeys and cats too, what they've determined is that if you're just your brain, there is no countable number of minds in one organism. Okay, that's a weird thing to say, so I'm going to say that again. There's no countable number of minds in one human organism. That's the best explanation for the data. I can show you the research. I wish that I could spit it to you chapter and verse. I probably could if I really had more time. I didn't have more time. Everybody's sick. The country's going nuts. I'm losing it, right? So basically what happens is when the corpus callosum is severed, you have candidates that match up for parts of the person, or not just, or different persons, like a split personality almost, but it's caused by this split in the brain. So what'll happen is the left side of the brain can talk and can calculate, while the right side of the brain has spatial reasoning, emotional reasoning, but it can't talk and it can't calculate almost at all, all right? It controls certain parts of the right brain, the right side of your brain controls certain parts of the body, but it seems completely independent when they do the research. So at one point they'll flash a key ring on the left side of the screen, and they'll flash a set of keys without a key ring on the right side of the screen. And what they'll do is they'll put objects in front of the person. So the left side, so the right hand and the left side, the right hand will start drawing keys, but the left hand will search through a box of objects for keys because it has spatial reasoning while this one has calculations. And it almost seems like the research seems to indicate that there are two people present in this one brain. However, when you start getting into the different explanations as to why, it doesn't seem like there's two persons. It seems like that there's one person having trouble trying to communicate what they're doing. But the person certainly cannot be an animal, and it certainly can't be a material object for that to work. The only reason that you come up with these problems is when you treat a person, what you are, which I think is a soul, as a material object. When you start treating a person like a material object, you end up coming up with these ridiculous problems. But people don't want to espouse that you're an immaterial thing because it makes the world spooky and strange. That's literally what people will say. So there's another question in the chat. I'm jawing on and on and on. I wonder what happens with the heart transplant. No, I don't think it leads to animalism, Sarah. You're wrong about everything. That's interesting. Those who are, Casper says, that's interesting. Those who are considered savants, however spell it, that corpus part isn't present off topic. You're saying that savants tend not to have a corpus callosum?
I think I saw a documentary on savants, and I think that they said that they don't have the corpus callosum part in like that middle part. I could be wrong. It was off topic. Like when you were talking about it, it was just when you were just talking.
No. It's fascinating because if you really want to, like one of the things that really motivated me to do this presentation was split brain cases, and especially Thomas Nagel's work and Tim Bain's work. But I haven't been able to get into that. What happened was in the last presentation that I did, really what it got off on is like, well, how do you know that you're not still just the organ that is your brain, but you do change every 2 minutes, or that you are just equal to that material part and we just have to bite the bullet on some of the weird things, and I try to jack the price up of that conclusion, which I think it turns into ridiculously absurd conclusions when you start to do it. But people will stick to their story, and it's fine. You know, rational people disagree, but I think that it's very hard to believe. Anyway, no, with savants, it is an interesting thought that savants have different brain activity and different brain constructions. The main reason why I would disagree that you are your brain is really because of Phineas Gage. And a lot of other people who have serious brain damage and yet still are persons. I don't think you can divide persons. I don't think you can divide up a person. I don't think Terry Schiavo, for instance, is less of a person because she was in a vegetative state. And that's why there was a court battle over it, because people take this stuff very seriously. Okay, so Casper asks, I wonder if when Paul talks about sin nature and the duality of his sin nature, I wonder what he talks about, and what he talks his battle when he talks about.
Sorry.
I wonder if mind battling with the brain.
You know where Paul? Yeah, sorry. You know where Paul? Sorry, my texting sucks. You know when Paul in Romans, when he talks about just his sin nature in that battle, I just wonder, like, since you're talking about, like, you know what I mean, the two persons. I wonder if, like, there's any correlation, but that's what I was thinking about when he talks about how, like, there's this battle between him, and I wonder if there's, like, you know, any correlation. But it's just interesting that you were saying that.
Yeah, no, I think that I think that's definitely something. I think that the reason we have that is because we have a soulish nature we have a fleshly nature and a spiritual nature, especially after you're saved. You have the desire to do what's right, but you don't have the ability, or at least you don't have the capacity to exercise that sort of desire. Some people think Romans 7 is pre-conversion. I get the impression it's not, but that's a different sort of exegesis. But regardless of all the scientific and philosophical data, I do wonder what you guys think about this, because personhood is coming up in the news pretty often, and it's a bit removed, and I don't want to just be like, hey, let's be relevant, right? I hate that. But it's coming up pretty often because there are people who are treating people like second-class citizens, like less than a person. When someone gets treated that way, there's a pretty strong reaction to that. Most people don't want to be treated like they're just a bag of bones, like they're just a bag of chemicals. People want to be treated like they have dignity. People want to be treated with respect. People want to be treated like they deserve that. I don't know why we think so. I think it's probably because we're made in the image of God. And I think that we bear that image, and it's wrong to deface that image. And I think that as Christians, we need to take that very seriously, considering, look at the news right now. You have someone who was treated poorly, not the way that God would tell us to treat not the way that Jesus would tell us to treat our neighbors, not the way that God created us to treat one another. And we have a very, very large backlash, regardless of the politics, regardless of which side you take on any of these things. I think that it's really important that we affirm the fact that personhood is more than just your parts. Because if it's just bags of chemicals mad at other bags of chemicals who are dressed differently, I think that degrades the entire debate in a pretty big way. And I think that when people are taught in the university that, you know, really you're just an overgrown ape that thinks they're a conscious thing, when really it's like there's no such thing as consciousness. You know, you can't be conscious of being conscious, or, you know, that's not real. Or Daniel Dennett's whole spiel about how, you know, the intentional stance is taken towards you by other people, so you think you're a self because other people think they're selves, which is infinite regress, ridiculous reasoning out the years. But you get a lot of ridiculous nonsense that gets pushed in academia. You get a lot of ridiculous nonsense that gets pushed in philosophical literature, but when it gets challenged by the scientific data and the philosophical data, it doesn't stand up. The fact of the matter is, not only do we have a deep intuition that we deserve to be treated a certain way and that we're more than just the sum of our parts, but the data seems to indicate that we're more than the sum of our parts. And it's really important to make sure that we take that seriously, especially in this day and age when people are looking for respect and looking for that sort of care and affirmation from not only their government, but from each other. And we need to treat people accordingly, regardless of your politics. I'm not affirming one side, the other. I have my opinions, but that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is we're made in the image of God. And as persons, we ought to treat each other like persons. And that requires respect. Does that make sense, guys?
Yes.
The silence is deaf. Don't answer, Jane. We already know that you're on board. Everybody else is too quiet. You're freaking me out, people. I'll just say
Yes. Yes.
All right, so we got another question, Sarah Griffith. God, Sarah, do you ever stop? How does this idea of duality of man's soul versus flesh not fall into some Gnostic view? Is that a danger? I do think that there's something to be said for that. Yeah, I don't want to say that you're only your soul and that your body just doesn't matter. The body is the temple of the Holy Ghost. The body is something that you were given. The body is a bunch of matter. I just want to go off the head with this one. The body is a bunch of matter that does what I tell it to. If you cut this off tomorrow and stick it under a tree, in 10 years, it'll be part of the tree. The tree will just reabsorb it. It'll never do what I tell it to again. This bit of matter does what I somehow tell it to do. Why did God give us something so amazing? And why would we be allowed to mistreat it? You hurt somebody, you offend against somebody, especially like little children, you'd be better off being thrown into the ocean with a millstone tied around your neck. And a lot of other things. I think that the bread and the wine, communion, the idea that we commune together, we should greet each other, we should embrace each other, we should mourn with each other. I think that there's a lot in the scripture about how the flesh is not bad. The flesh is not just body. C.S. Lewis said it like this. He said, God likes matter. He invented it. And I think he does. And I think that's what this is. I don't know why it does what I tell it to do. I don't know why when I eat other matter that is of the right kind, that just starts becoming me. I don't know why that happens. I don't know why this body will one day be given up and burned or decay, and hopefully I'll be with the Lord. I don't know why, but it does seem like God seems to like matter. He became a human. He took on flesh. So I don't think that the Gnostics had a lot of legs to stand on. I do think that the soul part of you is what you are. Like C.S. Lewis said, you don't have a soul, you are a soul. You have a body. But that doesn't mean just because you have it that it's unimportant. Sarah's throwing more questions at me because, Sarah. So do you think the flesh in this Romans 7 is a kind of slavery or limitation to our will over our bodies? I don't know. Maybe I'd have to think about that. I do think that there's an internal struggle between what you're used to doing and what panders to you as a selfish self and what you are in Christ and the kingdom that you serve. I think that when you're a new creature in Christ, you have a different goal and you have a different actionable protocol for what you do with this thing. You're not supposed to have sex outside of marriage. You're not supposed to fill your body with drugs and poison to make your soul feel better, or at least more at home in the world or something. You're not supposed to do those things with your body. The body's the temple of the Holy Ghost. You have to treat it right. So it makes sense to say that that we're kind of stuck in our bodies. I feel that way sometimes. Like I get kind of bent out of shape sometimes. That it's like, to depart and be with Christ is far better. I get tired and I just being honest. I don't want to be a sojourner anymore. I want to go home. You know what I mean? And that's not like crazy. I'm not like mentally unstable. I look at it like this isn't my home, and I don't think that but we have a job to do. We have a job to do here, and that's kind of my motivation. Does that make sense, Sarah?
Yeah, definitely.
Do you want to follow up with that? Because that was kind of amorphous. Do you want something a little bit better than that?
No, I thought it was good. I think, if you want to think about it longer with the idea of limitation, I think you slightly answered it by saying that there's, with a different kind of will that comes with being in Christ, there is therefore a process of limitation towards your other will, the will that you used to have, or the process and the functioning of why it used to work the way it did and why you want to use it in a different way. And so there's a tension still of wills as well as with flesh. Like physical flesh versus the will flesh.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like there are things I can do to pander to just myself and make myself feel nice, but Christ told me to love my neighbor as myself. Well, as C.S. Lewis famously asked, if you need any quotes from C.S. Lewis, I have a bunch. I sell them on Craigslist. C.S. Lewis put it this way. He goes, I'm supposed to love my neighbor as myself. How do I love myself? That's the question. How do I love myself? I treat myself pretty nice even when I'm mad at myself. I feed myself. I clothe myself. I take care of myself. I constantly treat myself well. That's what we should be doing for our neighbor. But it's a lot easier to ignore our neighbor and just give ourselves the things we want. It's very easy to do that, especially in quarantine. But I have a bunch of housemates, so it's harder to do. I have to go and love my neighbor every time I wash the dish, or I decide to try to not wash my dishes in the kitchen, or make a mess and not clean it up, or, you know, just leave the TV on all night or something like that. Like, I have to decide to love my neighbor, because it's a lot easier to just drift along in your own head, but it's a lot harder to treat other people like they have the same worth as you. So it's kind of like that. I would say that habitually, just from being a self, you are the sort of thing that wants to pander to yourself. But we're told to treat other people like they're on the same footing. Fitz?
Like it.
There's another question in the chat box, Jordan.
Okay. So Daniel asks, what advantage does substance dualism have over non-reductive physicalism? It depends on which non-reductive physicalism you mean. If you're Jaegwon Kim and you want to say that non-reductive physicalism is the idea that you have something like consciousness, intentionality, and qualia, and those are just functions of your brain, which is, I think he's a functionalist. I would say that what you're doing is punting. You're pretending like we could maybe explain this one day, but intentionality, consciousness, and qualia are the sorts of things that will one day be explained or housed or contained or understood in physicalistic terms. I'm one of those pessimistic people that doesn't think that's possible. So just to explain what I'm saying here, consciousness is the idea that you have a first-person perspective and that there is something like a what it is like. Have dashes between those words. It's one word, what it is like to be you. We tend to call each of them a quale, and collectively we call them qualia. So consciousness is a phenomenological stream. Basically, you're seeing a movie of a weird blonde guy in a chat box telling you all about the brain and stuff like that. You have a field of vision, you have auditory receptors, all kinds of perceptions that meld into one experience, okay? The binding problem was what's this called in consciousness. There's no answer for the binding problem in non-reductive physicalism. There is in substance dualism, which is that there's mental substance and physical substance. They're bound to each other in some odd way, whether it's a tied to relation, which is a philosophical primitive. There's no way to explain it. Or it's maybe it's a universal adhering in a physical object, which is odd. I could get into that a little bit, but it gets really complicated really quickly with the metaphysics. Non-reductive physicalism doesn't do the work of explaining what it means to have mental properties. Moreover, it can't explain mental causation. So it can't explain either kind. It can't explain mental to mental causation, why thoughts cause other thoughts, and it can't explain mental to physical causation, why thoughts cause actions. Now, some people want to say, well, thoughts don't cause actions. Thoughts are like the mind, and thoughts are like the shadow moving along the side of a vehicle, of a car. It's just a shadow. It's a shadow of the real thing. Well, that would make sense, except for the fact that we seem to be able to rewire our brains with cognitive behavioral therapy. It would also make sense if we didn't always constantly have the idea that you're controlling this. Now, if radical determinism is true, then we're doing a lot worse than we think. But I don't think radical determinism is something that you can really push and to take non-reductive physicalism over substance dualism. That seems like a high price to pay to keep non-reductive physicalism. Moreover, Jaegwon Kim actually, at the end of his book, Mind in a Physical World, says there's really no way to rescue non-reductive physicalism from its disadvantages. Substance dualism is not something he wants to espouse at all. Kim recently died. He was a great philosopher, but he basically, in his lectures in this book, Mind in a Physical World, which is a distillation of the lectures, he said there's really no way, there's no good answers for a non-reductive physicalist. You either have to be a behaviorist, which is ridiculous. You have to be a functionalist. What else could you be? A hard physicalist, like a straight up, like Paul Churchland, hard-nosed materialist. That's also not ideal. It's a lot of high prices to pay. I would say that given the problems that non-reductive physicalism faces, it's better to be a dualist than a non-reductive physicalist. There's also other options besides those two, but that's a long-winded answer. Is that a good way to answer your question, or is that a little too? What do you think about that, Dan? Radio silence from Daniel. Okay. I'm going to assume I answered your question. Oh, here's Daniel. J.P. Moreland seems to take non-reductive physicalism to be epiphenomenalism, but I'm not too convinced it needs to be. That's true. I don't know if JP takes non-reductive physicalism to be epiphenomenalism. It does seem like, oh, good night, Sarah. It's good to see you. We'll talk more. Me and you have to talk. We got to talk. One of these.
Sounds great. Bye. Love you all.
Bye. Yeah. So yeah, basically that's that. I don't know that JP takes it to automatically mean epiphenomenalism, but there's something unreal about the mind. On non-reductive physicalism. If you're a property dualist, then you're going to have some options, maybe that the substance dualism doesn't have. But there are arguments against that from physicalists. Like they just think that property dualism is not a way out of this problem. The real issue with the philosophical literature is describing consciousness, intentionality, and qualia. Consciousness is this first-person stream of information you're getting with colors and sounds, and it's all bound together. Qualia is what it is like, the experience for you, the subjective experience. And then intentionality is weird. Intentionality is the idea that you direct your mind in a certain direction. Okay, you can pick out certain things and refer to them. For instance, I can say the word tobacco. You know tobacco is a plant, it's rolled in cigarettes, it's something you smoke, you know all kinds of things about it. But how can I indicate it? What is that? What we mean by indication, the fact that I can direct my mind on something makes no sense. The whole notion of resemblance and representation, why a sign, why an octagon that's red means press my brake pedal, is completely mysterious. Nobody understands it. And it doesn't seem like it's the sort of thing that's physical. That's pretty agreed upon in the literature. So it's really hard to explain those three items without appealing to something non-material, okay? And nobody's done it so far. They either deny that it exists, which means they're denying their own thoughts, which is pretty freaking weird, or they just don't know what to say. And so I think the best explanation is something like dualism, or maybe an idealism, something like that. Weird, some not variety physicalism. I don't think physicalism can work. But there's only a few of you left. Does anybody else have any more questions? It's kind of a drink from a fire hose at this point, I think, right?
I would say, like, so when you were saying, like, sorry, you were saying, who said that we were just a brain? Was it, you said it was scientists or doctors or something like that? You said that.
There's a lot of neuroscientists think that, yeah.
Okay. So, like, are they I guess when they say that, as far as neuroscience, are they just denying the logic and consciousness, and they're just saying, we're just balls of meat, basically?
I mean, yeah, they do say that. The problem is that generally when you ask, they just say, well, consciousness can be explained by brain function. And it's like, what do you mean? And generally the question terminates there. I actually saw it, like people don't know how to explain that. When you start to say, like, you're just a brain, I say something like Phineas Gage. And when they say, well, no, you're not just a brain, or that Einstein is in a basement in Kansas. And it's like, well, no, Einstein's dead. It's like, well, what's the difference? He's a brain, right? Like, no, he's a functioning brain. Oh, okay, which one? Which functioning brain? The one inside your heart? Because there's one there too. Your brain and your central nervous system, there's one there too. Not only that, the problem of qualia is super weird. If you ever want to really pick somebody's brain who's a physicalist, ask them where the taste of chocolate is in your brain. And they'll say, well, there's an association in the amygdala or something like that. There's an association here with the electrical activity. When they hook you up to a monitor, they can see the same electrical activity when you taste chocolate. I'd be like, oh, perfect, that's fine. That's correlation. All right, now let me open up your head, and I want to stick my tongue on different parts of your brain. When am I going to taste chocolate? On this part, if I touch it here? And they'll go, no, that's gross. Stop saying things like that. And I'll be like, yeah, exactly. Because you don't have anything like, it's not public. There's no, it's called private access. It's a problem of private access. There is nothing like that. Does anybody know Jeffrey Pondivita?
Yes, he's from the Philippines.
All right, he's joining now. So the problem with statements like, you are just your brain, it can't explain different, very distinctive features of our everyday life. For instance, the taste of chocolate. You can't find the taste of chocolate in my brain anywhere. You can find electrical activity associated with my report to you that I'm tasting chocolate, or you can, there's a myriad of brain scans you can say is like a taste of chocolate. Oh, well, when he tastes chocolate, this is the associated electrical activity. That's not the same thing. That's called type identity theory. Doesn't work. It's been eviscerated in the philosophical literature. You can actually look it up. It doesn't work. And the main reason it doesn't work is because of a thing called multiple realizability. They want to go with something like pain. So can octopuses feel pain? It's like, well, no, pain is just C fibers firing inside your brain. And it's like, well, octopuses don't have C fibers, so they can't feel pain. It's like, wait, maybe they have octopus pain. And it's like pain, but for octopuses. And you're like, but they don't have C fibers. It's like, well, maybe they have something else that's sort of like that. And the problem is, then it's not C fibers. Pain, the essence of pain, is what it's like to be in pain. Or as Tom Nagel called it, the ouchiness is the essence of pain. He literally called it that, the ouchiness. The problem is you can't explain subjective experience in neuroscience. You can't explain it in third-person terms. Because first of all, neuroscience depends on the first-person report. If you're scanning my brain and you poke me with a pen and I say, ow, you can't look at the brain scan and say, you're not in pain, stop saying ow. You'd be insane to say that to me because I am the one who's in pain. I'd know before you would. I have different access. It's called private access. And I have direct access too. You ever notice that you only have your sensations? You never have mine? That's weird. It's a weird factor of the brain. And the fact is all of the neuroscience and all of the scientific literature on it is just associations. It's just correlations. But the thing itself, pain, the taste of chocolate, all the different subjective feelings that you have cannot be captured by what we mean by neuroscience. No more than the laws of the universe can be captured by mathematical equations. They can be described, but they can't be captured. It's not the same thing. So I would say that it's silly to say that you're just your brain. You're not. You're not just the reports that the third person gets from a machine. You are more than that. You have those things, but you're not those things. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. So I don't know if you guys don't have any more questions. I guess we could wrap up. I'd like to talk more if I can, but I could shut up too. Either or.
That doesn't sound like you, Jordan.
No, it doesn't, Jane. I like to talk a lot. I'll say lots of things. You give me a camera, you give me an audience. That's all I need.
I'm the same way. It's okay.
I think it's both of you are from Jersey.
Well, I'll tell you something. Casper has seen my Facebook. He knows what I get up to.
Yeah, I think it might be a Jersey thing. I don't know. I feel attacked.
Yeah. No, I mean, I appreciate you guys having me. I feel like I really wish I would have been able to give you a little bit more oomph, a little bit more to come away with. This stuff is tough, and these presentations got really weird with all this political stuff going on. I live in LA County. Everybody's getting shut down. My girlfriend's terrified. My dad's in the hospital. My siblings are out protesting, and I'm a little worried about the future of what we think of as persons. So I try to do my best. I hope you guys got a lot out of it.
Thanks, Jordan, man. I really appreciate it. It was really good.
Oh, thank you. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. I'll put my email in the chat real fast if anybody's interested in that. But I don't have much else to say. I mainly do. I should say this. I have a lot more to say, but it's more conversational, anecdotal. I don't want to be like the presenter who's telling you all these things. When I really just like a lot of it is just my graduate student level understanding. I'm not an expert. I'm not a neuroscientist, but I do read these people, and that's what they say. I've
Just
given you a lot. Most of what I said is in quotes. But,
Not an expert, but a nerd.
so, not an expert, but a nerd. I'm gonna get that put on my gravestone, actually.
That's good. I like that.
Yeah,
I like that thing. So, Jordan, wait. So, what are you getting your studies in?
Philosophy, hopefully philosophy of mind. I'm studying persons now a lot. I'm really
A lot of them?
Huh?
A lot of persons?
No, persons a lot. Not a lot of persons, but persons a lot. Like I want to know, like I'm really interested in questions like what's a belief? Because I believe in Jesus for my salvation. That's important. It's important to know what that looks like. I want to know what it looks like to experience something. How do we kind of describe that in the best terms possible? And I think that there are guys like Edmund Husserl who were fascinating with a lot of these things. I think that there are really, really interesting and accessible bits of data now that we can get our hands on. So that's what I'm doing.
There are three persons in the Trinity, Jordan.
Yeah, yeah. That's a weird question. I think that there are three persons in one deep pericortical relation. And I think that pericorsis, doing my my very poor theological work, the word pericorsis captures what Jesus does in our hearts. It's a relationship that doesn't divide the substance but doesn't confound the persons, and Jesus is actually in your heart. And I think that's perfectly describable. I think that's exactly what's going on in the Trinity, though it's different in us because we're not divine. But Jesus in our hearts, that's a real thing, and I think that we can actually describe it. But maybe one day I'll talk to you about pericorsis.
If it has to do with persons, why not?
Yeah. But yeah, I know this is our last meeting. I wish it was a little bit more of a bang. I hope you guys are all going to be safe. Yeah.
Look at the article link that I posted at the top.
Oh yeah, the link.
Check it out. Check it out. Watch the video. I hope you get touched by it.
Yeah,
I hope you all get touched by it.
I saw it already. You guys should watch that video. It's important.
It's really touching.
Yeah, it is.
So Jane, watch it.
Yeah, I'm getting the link right now.
Okay.
Okay, I think that should do it. Jane, do you have anything else you want to say to all these guys?
Let me turn my camera on. So I don't know if we're gonna do any of this over the summer, but I will keep in touch with everybody to see if people want to maybe do something every once in a while.
That'd be great.
So Chris, are you guys going back on campus in fall? What is your school year gonna look
Well,
like?
SMC told us we're going to be remote fall as well. So fall, spring, and summer will be remote as of now. That's the plan. Will it change? We don't know, but they plan to be remote in fall still.
Okay, so that means I probably won't be seeing you in the fall.